As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. Let's start off with an easy one here. When they looked at people who follow gaming influencers, male versus female, I'm curious if you guys think there's a disparity between male and female in terms of following of gaming influencers. And how big do you think that disparity is?
I mean, in raw numbers, I would assume that male would be bigger just because the male audience is larger. But when it comes to
no, as a percentage, Lindsay,
yeah, percentage of each, I don't know. Like I feel like I could invent a story for either way. As in, like female gamers are maybe a little bit more loyal because it's still a smaller, it's maybe a smaller, more niche hobby considered. But I don't know. I feel like I could invent a story for both sides.
Well, let me show you guys how the following of gaming influencers compares to other genres of gaming influencers as it relates to your gender, right? And so this slide I thought was very interesting where if you look here, so I'll make it a bit bigger, the gender profile of people who follow gaming influencers, 69% male, 31% female. And if you compare it to any other genre, it's the one where males represent the largest percentage of those who follow that kind of influencer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, really quick, was platform specified? Do you know?
No.
Okay, yeah, then this actually does make a lot of sense. I was kind of thinking only in terms of Instagram, but
whereas if you look at something like music, people who follow music influencers split right down the middle, right? Pretty much. Almost 50-50, where male and female follow music influencers equally. Anyone surprised that gaming's at the top here in terms of the most male dominated in terms of the following of influencers? And now let me just say, even though it is the highest, what I thought was interesting here was it's still 31% female, which I think goes against a lot of, like, people like to say, oh, this is a male, very male dominated industry. The reality is 31% of the people who follow gaming influencers are female. So there's definitely a sizable female contingent there.
I think that's a good point. I would be very curious to see. I mean, we always talk about, how the gaming market is definitely more gender diverse than people think. But I do think that stat often includes mobile gaming and maybe not what we would consider hardcore gaming. And the only reason I bring that up is because those are typically the people, hardcore gamers are typically the ones that are watching gaming content on Twitch, they're following gaming influencers. So I'd be super curious to see how that 69-31 breakdown relates to, like, literally something like the player base of COD or like, Halo player base. It's probably fairly similar, maybe. I'd be curious.
Well, so here's the second question. Do you guys think it changes if instead of looking globally, talk only about US teenagers? Do you think gaming loses, stays in that top spot? Do you think the percentage has changed drastically?
I wouldn't think drastically, but I've also been wrong about every single one of these. So if I'm wrong again, I won't be surprised.
Well, let me show you this one. So this is just US teens. Same slide, same study, but limited to just US teenagers. You'll see gaming is still the second biggest, but the two that sort of dominate from a male perspective are sports and gaming. So men will follow, male US teenagers will follow gaming influencers and sports influencers in much larger proportions than female.
And fitness too, which is interesting. I don't know.
But
I don't know what we draw into that, but
ones that were like 50-50 when you look up above, like music, all of a sudden are more female dominated, right? From a influencer following standpoint, which I thought was interesting. Gaming gets more male, but other mediums get more female. Lindsay, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's fine. Sorry for cutting you off there. But yeah, because even the celebrity disparity, the reality TV disparity skews heavily different. And I will say one of the reasons I think that is because whenever I read the word influencer, I automatically only think of Instagram. And the reality is obviously that there's a billion other platforms, especially around the world, where people can and do follow different types of influencers. So that's my own bias coming out for sure. But I think definitely like when you talk about platforms like YouTube, I would guess that's and Twitch, a huge one. I would guess that a lot of the people that are on there are male and are following gaming influencers. So it's just like these things are always so interesting because especially when you zoom in and zoom out from global to domestic, it like totally changes the conversation. And it also shows how much of a US based view I have and how Instagram is obviously the first thing that I think of and the only thing that I think of and can invent stories for what's happening on there. But I'm not exactly tuned into what's happening on other platforms.
So guys, let me bring up the next one. This next one is complex. Okay. I think there's a lot of ways we can break this down, but it was the most shocking to me. And I'm really curious if you guys are shocked also. Okay. And this one is, they looked at the followers of gaming influencers. Okay. So we're narrowing in on this group of people. So people who follow gaming influencers around the world, okay? And within that group of followers of gaming influencers, how many of those people considered themselves light gamers, moderate gamers, or heavy gamers? In other words, played less than 2 hours a week, played 3 to 10 hours a week, or played 11 plus hours a week. Okay, so we're looking at essentially some correlation here between people who follow gaming influencers and how much they play themselves. Which is
this sort of is exactly what I was looking at double click into before. So I'm going to guess that it's skewed to the hardcore gamers, but again, we're always seem to be wrong here.
I'm going to guess the opposite.
Well, this is by country too. So we can see the US relative to other
slicing and dicing the data here.
And so when I bring this up, take a look at this. Okay. On the left-hand side, you see Germany. Okay. In Germany, 50% of the followers of gaming influencers are heavy gamers.
Wow.
If you compare that to the US, it's almost half. When you look at the number of people who follow gaming influencers who are also heavy gamers. The US is much more dominant in that moderate gamer kind of segment. I'm curious, Jeff. You said this is something you wanted to. I think it's really interesting.
I wasn't even thinking the country angle. It's I don't know what to like make of that, but it's it's striking to see that difference, and that is a big difference.
I can't believe you guys
I'm struggling to say something intelligent about what I guess a question for you, turn it back on you, but like, what if you're a brand or so, like what's your takeaway? Like, what's your actionable like takeaway? Like, how would you use this data? I guess it's super interesting, but I'm trying to figure out like what we can do, like what's an actionable thing we can glean from it. If you have any, I don't know.
I do. Let me just get Lindsay's comment first, and then I'm going to answer that question, Jeff.
Yeah, I also have an answer to that. And
okay, yeah, go ahead.
That people like gaming as a form of entertainment, as a form of both passive entertainment and active entertainment, but that the sit back experience with gaming is just as key and important as the interactive sit down and play experience. So as a company, like this is a huge chance to get in on some of the content and be able to pay for sponsorships and advertisements in sit back experiences. And that's what I take away from it. But I can't believe that this is a surprise to you guys. I totally thought that this would have been skewed towards the light and moderate. Like the exact breakdown.
I just thought of one before I forget. And Paul, this might be something you had already thought, but like maybe that something you could, if you're a brand, you could take away, or an agency, you say, hey, if you are an endemic sponsor, you may want to sponsor German gaming influencers, versus if you're a non-endemic sponsor, you're more interested in US gaming influencers, because clearly maybe they're not as heavy gamers. They're more, they're doing more outside of gaming. There's a little more leisure time that you can attack there, versus Germany. It's like, hey, if you're selling mice and keyboards, like you'd be crazy not to be, using a German gaming influencer, because their audience is just the perfect hardcore gaming audience.
Super insightful, both of you guys. But like Jeff, I completely agree. That is one way you can slice and dice this and have a real tangible takeaway. Because if you do sell mice and keyboards, Germany's the place to be, right? Through influencers, because 50% of the people who follow an influencer in Germany, right, are going to be hardcore gamers. I think the big actionable takeaway from this is there is most definitely correlation between following a gaming influencer and playing more, right? That there seems to be direct correlation, that if we add moderate and heavy together, right, and call these people regular gamers, there's most definitely a correlation between people who follow influencers and play. And so there's definitely actionable data there in terms of the kinds of activations you do, how you involve gamers in those marketing campaigns. You don't assume they're just watching and following blindly. You have to assume they're playing also. So I do think there's a lot that's actionable there, especially as you pointed out, country by country. Let me just read some of these comments because I'm behind. Chris says, can anyone name one German esports athlete? I mean, to be fair, Chris, they're just saying anyone in Germany who follows a gaming influencer, not necessarily a German one. Chris says, guess big is really big. The Berlin International Gaming org. Antonio says, there's the proof right there. Americans are getting lazy. That is, that is an interesting takeaway, that Americans would rather consume gaming content, right? If we extend the idea of following a gaming influencer, that you're consuming their content, than play, right? Rather than play, compared to Germany, where there's more playing than consuming, maybe. That is an interesting sort of way of looking at it. All right, guys, I think I'm going to do one more here because I want to save some for the next week. This looks at gaming devices, okay? And again, we're slicing and dicing here, looking at two groups of people. Gamers, in other words, people who play 1 hour or more per week, and gaming influencer followers. Okay, so people who follow any gaming influencer, one doesn't matter, okay? And when we look at what devices they're playing, those two groups, if you look at smartphones, tablets, about equal, right? So a gamer and a gaming influencer follower will use these devices in about equal quantity. When you look at desktop or laptops like PC, gaming influencer followers will play significantly more on these devices than just a gamer. Also with game consoles, similar disparity. Also with handheld devices like a Switch or whatever. And to a smaller extent, maybe VR headsets. But what's interesting is on mobile, they're on par. 3/4 of gaming influencer followers use their smartphone, tablets for gaming, on par with all gamers. But when we look at other devices used, those who follow gaming influencers are considerably more likely to use PCs, gaming consoles, and other devices. So the fact that you follow a gaming influencer, we can conclude that you use things, that you're more likely to use devices like a laptop, a console, or a dedicated gaming handheld, which I think is interesting. Because
so we
again,
assume that the pink is people who are gamers but don't follow.
Correct.
The green is
gamers, just general.
But it wouldn't include a gamer who's a gaming influence follower, or is the pink like everyone?
The pink.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a good. The pink, I believe, is everyone. Is anyone who calls himself a gamer. So it would include.
So the pink includes the green as well, obviously.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, I think what's interesting.
Didn't change my answer. I was just curious.
No,
sorry.
From a marketing and actionable standpoint, I think what's interesting here is if you're looking to market your product, right? In some ways, like you said, Jeff, depending on the product, if it's not mobile related, leveraging gaming influencers seems to be more effective, right? I think we can conclude that that's a more target rich audience if you're looking to sell through to people on those platforms.
Yes, I think it kind of goes. This is the second derivative of sort of what I think we deduced with the last chart is, and maybe this again is something that what I love about YouGov is they take these things that like we sort of know to be true, but they prove it. Which like if you're a brand and you're someone like selling, or if you're someone trying to convince a brand to spend dollars, like it's not easy enough to have like. You can't just have the profit come in and say, hey, if you follow influencers, you're probably more hardcore and you spend a lot on gaming. Like, they might trust the profit, but like normally, CMOs are going to want a little more data and rigor behind that. So like these two things show that, right? Like, I think this is just following that same thing. It's, hey, if you follow these influencers, you're more hardcore. You also buy more peripherals, play more on, PC hardcore things. So yeah, love it. I don't know. That's my takeaway, at least.